really make some smoking spreadsheets, really nifty spreadsheets for both personal and professional analysis. Then we'll move into some more intermediate and advanced topics. Absolute versus relative addressing is key to understand. We'll talk about conditional formatting, pivot tables, Vlookups, and some extended formulas. And then we'll also talk about some statistical tools and analytical tools that are built into Excel, namely the Analysis Tool Pack, Data Solver, GoalSeek, and some VBA and macros, VBA being Visual Basic scripts for Microsoft products. And finally, we will end the workshop with a discussion on, a brief discussion on how to present your data. Okay, once you have your data, how can you present it effectively? What are the best techniques to create professional looking documents? Those of you who are in my class know that I really need professional documents because A, it's too distracting to grade otherwise, and also B, it's great experience. So for those of you who have been in my classes in the past or are in my classes this semester, you'll know and appreciate what I mean here. And also this will be incredibly helpful to you in the workforce because we're always creating end use documents and not interim analysis that we float around. Interim analysis is great for collaboration, but ultimately our analysis generally goes into a finalized report or an executive presentation or what have you. So we'll be discussing that. I want to just discuss for a few minutes how you can maximize returns from today's workshop. We're going to go pretty fast. We only have a couple of hours. So we are going to be doing hands-on. This is designed to be a hands-on session. We will be moving rapidly through some of the topics I discussed. There will be many opportunities to practice, and I need you guys to take the opportunity to practice as we go along. I will pause you to give you a few minutes to try things, but you need to be ready with Excel locked and loaded on your computers so that you can proceed with the exercises that I have in store for you. The way to do that is just minimize the Zoom window and work in Excel. You'll be able to hear what I'm saying, and then you can also look at the screen in the Zoom window because I'll be showing a few things right in the spreadsheet actually. So I'll be doing the exercises with you so we can do them together. This isn't going to work unless you have your full attention. So if you're planning on multitasking and just being on this call, I will advise you to just save your time because it'll be a complete waste of time. So you really need to give me your full attention if you want to get the most out of this workshop. Try not to be distracted. Put your phone and text and all that on mute and try not to multitask. Again, you will miss the essence of some of the things that we're learning if you are doing multiple things. I'm not going to be talking about assignments. I know many of you are concerned and want to do well on some of the assignments that I have shared with you in my courses, in our courses together, but we're not going to be covering that. That being said, many of the things you learned today you can use, obviously, and make use of in making your assignments better and easier for you to work with. And finally, after the session is done today, you should continue to practice and extend what you've learned. I am recording this session and I will make the recording available to you for your reference. The disclaimer there is sometimes the recording doesn't work quite that well with Zoom, so I can't promise the results, but my intention is to record this session and share it with you. So, are we ready? I'm just going to have you take a deep breath and get your Excels fired up. So here we go. Okay, so I want to first talk about spreadsheets versus databases. What is the difference? Most of you might know the difference, but I think it's great to spend 30 seconds or so highlighting the key differences. First of all, spreadsheets like Excel or Google Sheets are essentially ledgers of data. You can store and manipulate data and present numbers and do fancy things to numbers. You can also do fancy things to text, but primarily you're dealing with numbers. The texts are mostly for labels and classifications. Databases, on the other hand, are products like Microsoft Access, MySQL, Oracle DB. I equate these to electronic file cabinets. They're sort of a bucket of information and data, really. You can receive, store, organize, and present data. You have to use the right application, whether you want to use spreadsheets or you need to use databases. That's something you need to make a decision for up front. Because otherwise you're going to be doing things longhand, and it's more difficult if you're not using the right tool. So again, for storage and retrieval, databases; for manipulation, presentation, calculation, things like that, spreadsheets are the way to go. Okay. Can some people share with me on text if you're able to hear me? A couple of students have, one student can't hear me, can't hear audio. Can one or two of you tell me if you can hear audio or you're not able to hear? Please chat in the chat window. Okay, great. So people who can't hear, I think there's one student, there must be something, volume or something like that off on your end. All right, I'm going to continue. Okay, so this class is about spreadsheets, so we will not discuss databases in detail. We can have a separate class on databases, but that's a whole separate area of study and practice. If you're interested in learning about databases, we can certainly have a primer to databases session like this one. But again, that would be, I would urge you to look into taking an intro to database design course or database management course to learn more about how to use databases effectively and learn SQL and so on. What a spreadsheet does is it gives you a way to abstract away from data. Not only can you store and manipulate data, but you can also abstract away from data and do more things to it. So I like to think of it as almost an infinite, not quite infinite, but for our purposes, a near infinite series of rows and columns. The intersection of a row and column is called a cell. And you can, in a cell, you can store numbers, you can store text, you can store even images and blobs, many other types of data. And you can also store formulas and use other information from other cells to produce results. So kind of, you can have cell referencing, and we'll again talk about cell referencing in a bit. And also, you can do basic data science stuff, which is kind of neat. You can do formatting, charting, what if scenarios, statistics, and so on. We're going to touch on some of those and give you impetus for trying things further yourself offline after the session is over. Okay. So many of you asked me what the difference is between Excel and Google Sheets. There's a preference here. Many people use Excel and a lot of people use Google Sheets. I use both. For schoolwork, I use Excel. For personal work, I use Google Sheets largely because Google Sheets is free and I can integrate very well with other Google products once I have my analysis. But the differences between the two boils down to 5 different things. The main thing is really cost, okay? One is free and the other is licensed. Collaboration is really a big strength of Google Sheets. Google Sheets allows you to collaborate very cleanly with other team members, classmates, instructors, so on and so forth. So it's great to be able to store a Google Sheet on the cloud and have multiple people work on it. And it actually shows you real time who's in your spreadsheet and what are they doing. So it's pretty neat. And most of the basic functionality the same. There is more robustness in Excel, but many of the options are paid options. There's a lot of third parties that you can buy tools from that integrate into Excel. So in totality, I would say Excel has more functionality if you buy all of it, if so to speak. Google Sheets actually has more for free, if you want to think of it that way. I say that lightly because both of these vendors, companies, Microsoft and Google, are actively working on increasing capability, right? Every release, every few months, there's something new that they deliver. Microsoft Excel is much more organized about it. Google just keeps delivering functionality and they won't even announce it. You'll just go into your spreadsheets from last year and you'll be able to see new buttons and new things every now and then. And maybe the old stuff doesn't work because they retire it. Google is notorious for not letting you know exactly and having transparency about when things are coming and when things are being retired in the tool. That being said, for most of us, it doesn't affect us. When you become a more advanced and a regular user, you start to notice some differences and you wish there's a little bit more stability. That said, I like both of these tools. If you're on a budget and after your license for the school subscription expires with Microsoft 365 once you graduate, you'll have to pay to use Excel. And you may not want to do that. So certainly feel free to play around with Google Sheets. Many of the things we're going to try today and experiment with are doable in both platforms, both tools. We're going to focus on Excel, and there will be some differences in commands and where the buttons are and how the syntax works for both products. But for this purpose, for today's purpose, we're going to stay with Microsoft. Okay, so now we are ready for doing some hands-on work. Again, some of you are going to fly through this, some of you are going to struggle and take a little bit more time, and yet a few of you are probably going to give up. I hope it's not the latter. I hope there's many less of you that actually give up trying these things. It does take practice. It just like learning anything, it takes time and oftentimes self-study. But we're going to go through the basics in the next hour or so and see if it's beneficial for you. So the first thing you want to do is download and make a copy of the sample workbook I've created. You really can't, I know it's tempting to click on the URL on the screen, but you're not going to be able to do that. Or maybe you will, I don't know. You might be able to click on it, but if you're not, you can simply type in this tiny URL right in your browser, and then what you need to do is download that workbook and make a copy of it on your computer. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to do that. Please just throw in the chat window when you are ready to go to the next step and when you've done that. Okay. All right, we're going to move ahead. So, one sec. Okay, so let me get there myself. So you do need to download this and not open it in Google Sheets. So it's very important to download and then find it on your laptop and open the workbook in Microsoft Excel. If you just open it from the Google Drive, a link, it will default to opening it in a Google Sheets, because this is Google's way of trying to lock us into their tool. So even though it knows it's an Excel file, it converts it to a Google Sheet because it realizes it's a spreadsheet. We don't want to do that. We want to open this file in Excel, okay, on your local computer. So please make sure you're doing that. I'm doing this right now, and I am going to, and then you should be in the first tab all the way to the left, first worksheet called Topics. Please let me know when you can see it on the chat window. Okay. Now I'm going to do a new share, and I'm going to all right. On my screen, you should be able to see my version of that spreadsheet, okay? So it should say topics. It should have the today agenda slide that I have embedded in there. Can you see on my on your Zoom screen, my workbook? Perfect. Okay. So you're in the right place. So now, keep your version on the side until I tell you to try stuff. And let's pay attention to the Zoom screen. In other words, my screen for a moment. So this is what we're going to do, right? This is what we discussed at the start of the session, in the intro section. We're going to do some basics right now. And then we'll move to intermediate, and then we'll move to presentation methods, right? So you can see on the bottom, let me just show you what I've created for you. This topics worksheet is simply just a guide for us, right? This is sort of the agenda of what we're going to do. Then you'll see the next tab over to the right says Module 1, the basics, and we're going to cover literally the basics that we mentioned in our agenda. Then we'll move to Module 2. So I've organized the training into modules. Module 2 will be the intermediate advanced topics. And finally, Module 2 will be results. That's what stuff should look like after you've done it successfully. So you will be working in Module 2 interim and advanced topics tab, and then we'll compare if we are able to do what the instructions are that I've laid out, and make it look like what you have in Model 2. So Model 2 is the solution set, and you'll have that with you to compare even after the training is done. And finally, there's another Module 2 for temperature data, and I'll get to that later. That's just another use case of how we can use some advanced Excel techniques. So without further ado, let's move to setting up your spreadsheet so you can do certain things. So the first thing you want to do now on your spreadsheet is what I have on the right side in column K. If you see on my screen, you'll see that it says File Options, Custom Ribbons, Developer. And then it'll say File Options, Add-ins, Manage Add-ins, Analysis Toolpack, and Solver. And then Enable Editing and Enable Content. What that is I want you to do those 4 things for me. You want to go in your version of Excel, and you want to go under the File menu, which is the upper left-hand corner, right? Upper left-hand corner. Then go to Options. So it'll be like File, it'll be Options, right? And then you want to go to Customize Ribbon, okay? And you want to make sure on this right-hand side, the developer box is checked off. So you will probably have the developer box unchecked. You want to check that off, okay? The reason we're doing this is because we're going to be using advanced techniques, namely VBA and macros. And for security reasons, Excel does not turn that on for you by default. You have to go in and enable it explicitly so that you can have those features, because people who don't know what they're doing, if they install this, they can really mess up a lot of data and probably even create viruses or open themselves up to some virus exposure. So Excel, just for security reasons, disables it. Excel also disables this because it takes up more memory and it takes up more, Excel uses up more processing on your computer. So the computer and the application does take up more resources and it slows down other apps. So that's why it's unchecked, if you're wondering. But once you check, check the box, then you won't have to do it again. Okay, some people are requesting the link. I'm going to send the link again. Let me see here. In case some people got knocked off or are going a little slow, I will get you the link in a second here. Okay. Oops. All right. Okay, I sent the, let me send the link to everyone. There we go. So in the chat window, I have sent the link to the spreadsheet that we're working with. Again, you want to download and make your own copy and open it in Excel. I'm going to give people a couple of minutes. I hope people are staying on top of this. We're going pretty slow. I'm going to give a few more minutes for people to catch up, okay? Can you text me if you're behind or you want me to wait further? Okay, we'll give you a couple minutes before we get started, or before we continue, rather. All right, where are we? Okay. All right, so the other thing you want to do is similar to adding the developer checkbox or the developer option. And once you do that, by the way, you will see on the top menu bar this tab called developer. You don't need to click it yet, but you'll see developer there. And we'll use that a little later in the training session, okay? You can see it on my screen right here. I'm circling it with my mouse. And you should see that once you have done that first step. Now we're going to do add-ins. So we're going to go to same thing, file. We're going to go to options. And then we're going to go to add-ins right here, which is usually underneath, a couple of spots underneath the custom ribbon selection. And when you do add-in, you can go on the bottom and you can say manage Excel add-ins right here, okay? Manage Excel add-ins, hit go, okay? Once you hit go, I want you to select Analysis Tool Pack and Solver Add-in, just like I'm doing now. Okay. All right, so can you guys tell me if you have done the first two? Perfect. I'm seeing a few people do it. Excellent. Then what you want to do is you will see up here, enable editing, and you might even get, some of you might get another button called with asking you to confirm if you want to enable content. On the top of your Excel, if you see a question here, it'll say protected view. If it's asking you to click these buttons called enable editing and enable content, you want to click both of those. Once you click those, those messages will go away and you'll be ready to use the spreadsheet and the features that we're trying to enable, okay? So up until now, what we've done is we've basically primed the workbook that I gave you, because I have a lot of stuff in here. I have some code I created for you. I've created some macros. I've created a lot of different things. And for security reasons, when you go in it first time, it's asking you, should we enable the content and should we enable editing, okay? Otherwise, if you don't click enable editing, you will have only a read-only version, which means you can't actually edit many of the things that you're going to need to edit to complete this training successfully, okay? I apologize if I think at least one student is having trouble with the audio. I'm not sure why. I know we have approximately 20 people on the call and they are able to hear. You know, I think you have to try a different browser or a different computer, or maybe reboot. Maybe your microphone is on mute. Or your speakers are on mute. I can't tell what the individual problem is, but this should be working pretty flawlessly for most people. All right, we're going to move along to the basics, all right? So in basics, so what we're doing for most of this training is we're using my expense data. All of you know I enjoy my meals outside and at home, and many of you and many of my students and I have had some fine dining experiences together at team events and others. So basically, I tend to spend a lot of money on food, and I was getting upset at myself, and many other people in my family were getting upset at me as to where the money is going. So back in 2019, about the start of March in 2019, I went and downloaded my credit card information and transactions, and basically did a dump of all of the, basically created a comma separated value file type. Most of you, many of you have debit cards and credit cards, can do the same thing by going to your bank website and downloading your own data. And I encourage you for fun to try doing that. But right now you can see my own dirty laundry, so to speak, and you can see my expenses and work with my expenses so that there are no privacy issues with the kind of expenditure you guys are doing. I'm sure you don't want others to see where you're spending the money. But here is my live records from January 1st to about, I guess, the first week of March, okay? And it's just data. This data got imported. You can basically go and do a file open, okay? And if you do a file open, it will give you options to go and search for a file. Any comma separated file or text file can be imported right into Excel. And that's where this data came from, okay? And what we're going to learn basically is how to do some basic, quick formatting, okay? So you can open this tab. You should be on the Module 1 Basics tab, and you can select, let's say, the headings and do a bold. You can center this very much like Microsoft Word. You can underline, and also you can shade, for example. So I have all of these in different format now, just to show you how it works. All right, So there's some basic formatting, and I don't like the black on green, so I'm going to do white on green. So there's some basic formatting, okay? Now we're going to, let's see, we're going to do a little bit of sorting. Let's say I want my data sorted by, this looks like it's default sorted by date. You can see it's descending order. So my most recent transactions are up front, and then you go down all the way, and I've got approximately like 200 or so records on this. Boy, have I spent a lot of money. And that's basically how it works, you know. This is a problem I have, spending problem, okay? Hopefully you guys don't have as big of a problem as I do. So there you go. So these are my transactions, and I want to sort these in a different way though. I want to sort, I'm going to select this spreadsheet by clicking this box on the upper left-hand corner. This selects the entire spreadsheet, right? Not just a few rows or what have you. So I'm just going to select that, and then I'm going to go to the data menu option. And when you click on data and you click sort, it'll tell you what you want to sort by. So first of all, I'm going to make sure this is checked off. It says my data has headers, which means that it automatically takes the first row as the header data. And then we want to sort by, let's say, the cost, okay, or the transaction amount, which is called debit. And then I want it to be largest to small, meaning I want to see my topmost expenses on top. So, and I click OK, and you can see that it sorted the data. You should try this, by the way. You should be doing this alongside with me. I'm going slow enough so you can try it, okay? And now you can see that my data is sorted by the most expensive charge, going down all the way to the least expensive charge, okay? And you can see my homeowner's insurance was almost $2,000. And then my Geico, which is my car insurance, was $1,800. And the rest of those big items are like fuel, because my house costs a lot to heat, and so on and so forth, okay? So this is basically, oh, and this is where I went last winter break, to Florida. So those were my plane tickets. Anyhow, this is basically how I did sorting. Now, there's another cool little thing you can do if you select the same thing, and there's something called filter. I'm pretty sure most of you have done sort, but you may not have done filter. So let me show you how filter works. Filter, when you click it, it automatically puts in a data set like this, it puts little arrows here, okay? And what that's saying is you can actually just filter. So say I want to only see what I have done in just January, right? Maybe not everything, but maybe my expenses only for January. So I can just unclick February and March. It's smart enough to recognize that this is a date column. And if I click OK now, it would basically filter the rows and only show me January expenses. And you can see this could be very useful. Maybe I want only expenses over $1,000, right? So I can focus and hone in on just my largest expenses. I can do that as well. Now, when you see the filter is on, this little icon changes. This means that the filter is on. So if you're looking at this and you think it's your entire data set, you're mistaken. It is a filtered data set, and that's why this icon changes. And you can see the row columns, or the row numbers are also skipping. Like, for example, you see 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 would have been a row that maybe was not in January. It was probably a February or March. So it hides it in this filter, okay? And that's why these are not continuous. They are skipping many rows because it's skipping February and March. All right, so I'm gonna turn this back on. I don't want the filter, so I'm just gonna click the filter button here, and the filters go away automatically, okay? So I've shown you how to do filters, and let's just see back go back to our topics and make sure we're on track. We've done sort, we've done filter. Let's do a quick chart. And then I've shown you formatting. We're going to do some formulas and functions next, okay? Okay, so I'm going back to, please tell me if you're following in the chat window. I've asked a question if everyone's following to make sure I'm not losing people. That's wonderful. Okay, so I'm back in this tab, in this worksheet, and I want to now add a chart, okay? So I'm just going to click on column C, okay? And I'm going to go here and say insert. And then in insert, I have chart menu here on the ribbon, okay? It's a chart group. And I'm going to add a quick chart called a scatter chart, okay? So here's my scatter chart. And you're going to see if I do the scatter chart, basically, if I make this larger, you see that all of these data points, okay, are below 200. This makes me feel good. It makes me feel like, you know, my average expense, even though this is probably over $8,000, is, you know, a little bit over $100, right? And I got a lot of small expenses. This probably is all my food, actually, you know, all those different groceries and things like that that we use in the family or even restaurants or what have you. And these are the two larger expenses that we saw. This was the insurance, right? So you can see quickly, I can visualize my data. This is a basic visual. How many steps did it take me? Like 1 or 2. I just went and did charts here, right? And of course you have different chart styles. You can change colors. You can change the layout. You can switch rows and columns. Like, let me see what happens if we do that. You can see this is not such a great view because my expenses are all hovering around $100. You can't see this nicely if you switch the row and column. So if you switch at the back, you get a better view, okay? And of course, there's different chart types. There is, this was a scatter plot. I could have done a variety of other things, line charts and bar charts and so on, okay? So I'm just gonna delete this so it doesn't get in our way, but it's easy to do a chart is as easy as insert, and then you select from one of the chart menus. Now, you can customize it. I'm not gonna show you exactly right now. In the interest of time, I'm giving you an overview, but you can customize these charts in so many different ways. You can change the colors, you can do overlays, you can change the axis, you can have a legend or hide the legend, you can move things around, you can title the charts, and so on and so forth, okay? So lots of stuff, good stuff you can do. Fantastic. All right, let's see. I am going to now show you, move to formatting, formulas and functions, okay? So this is my basic data from my credit card company, as I mentioned, from January to early March of last year. We're gonna use this data set and play around with it some more in this second module, okay? And you can see the same data set here pretty much, but I've done one more thing here. I have manually gone in and put a category, okay? So what I did is for all my expenses, and now this expenses records are sorted by date, I have put a category of either food, home and car, entertainment, or I think there's one more called shopping, okay? So basically I just tagged everything, okay? So I can start to analyze where my money is going, right? How much money am I spending on food, right? And how much am I spending on entertainment? And how much am I spending on, my home and my car and so on, okay? I wanna really understand and do some analytics, basic analytics on this, all right? So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna do a pivot table, okay? well, before we do that, let me jump to, yeah, actually, let me continue in this order that I have. As you can see, I have numbered the exercises from 1 to, I think 10 or 11, yes, 11. So there are 11 steps, 11 distinct things that we're gonna do to learn all that I have planned for you today, okay? And we're gonna do it pretty quickly. And again, if you don't, are not able to follow, that's okay. It's not really okay, but it's not the end of the world either. You can always do it offline. And I have the results already in module 2. So let me show you what module 2 results look like. And you can see everything here, right? This is what we're gonna end up doing if we do things correctly, okay? I did all of this last night, so it was pretty quick, okay? And I'm gonna show you how to do all of these and you're gonna practice. So let's go back to module 2 here. And we are going to now basically add, oops, a pivot table. So what does a pivot table do? A pivot table takes one of these one of these columns and turns the table on its side, if you will. So if you can imagine A through D being a virtual table, right? It's literally a table of almost 200 rows. And I want to say, sum up all of my expenses for food, and I've categorized these. So I want to now say, well, how much did I spend on food? How much did I spend on home and car and entertainment? I basically am pivoting the data off of these categories. That's when you use a pivot table, when you need to do something like that, okay? That's the most basic explanation I can give you. So let's say I want to sum by category, right? Which is what I said. I'm going to go insert, and then there's a pivot table up here on the far upper left corner, okay? If you're running the latest version of Microsoft Excel. Again, these buttons are in different places and the commands are in different places depending on the version of Excel. And also, if you're using Google Sheets, it's going to be in a different place. But if we click on Pivot Table, what I want to do is it's going to say select a table or a range. And I'm going to literally make sure my cursor is here in the range, right? And you want to then select column C and D, which is debt and category, okay? And then it's going to say, well, where do you want the pivot table report to be placed? You can say new worksheet or existing worksheet. we're going to say existing worksheet, and we want it right here, okay? Because that's what I've created space for. So I'm going to make sure that none of this exists here in case it's different. And I'm literally going to click on this column. And you can see when you do that, it actually puts that location right in here, right, for you. So it's all drag and drop. I mean, of course, you could have typed all of that in, but that's really painful and you make a lot of mistakes. So when you create this dialog box, this create pivot table dialog box, when you open it, you can specify the table and range, which was column C and D, in this module interim advanced topics worksheet. And similarly, you can specify where you want the report to go, okay? Let's see what happens if we click OK. It's saying there's already data in this spreadsheet here. Do you want to replace it? Yes, I want to replace it, okay? And now it's going to give us a window here, oops, a window, and it's going to say, well, what do you want to put in this pivot table? And I'm going to say, well, I want to put debit and category, okay? And that's what I'm going to click. And you can see if you click it, it actually does it on the left-hand side here. You can see it, all right? And it's pretty phenomenal, right? So look what it did. It basically said, well, there was $1,000 or so, a little over $1,000 in entertainment. Sure enough, my hunch was right. I'm spending the most amount, or not most amount, but I'm spending almost $2,000 on food, which is ridiculous, actually. And of course, the home and car expenses are the greatest because they have all my insurance costs and things like that, and my shopping. was a modest $585. I don't buy too many clothes or too many other things. And this entertainment was high because we went to Florida for the family. So some of these expenses were booked during this time. So there you have it. That is a pivot table, okay? You can close out of the pivot table options that showed up when you added it, and you're left with a nice pivot table here, okay? Now what it did do is it removed my other yellow prompts here for the other assignments. So 3 and 4 are missing here. So I'm going to well, let me copy it from here just so we have it. It really doesn't matter if you do this step, but it'll be nicer because you can match it up to, you know, your other analysis there, right? Okay, so there you go. These are just placeholders, okay? I just have these headings there so we know what we're doing. So there you go, sum by category. This is as easy as it is, okay? Now, of course, there's a lot of different options. You can format this, you can retitle this, you can do lots of cool things, right? And to make this table better. If you wanted to put this table in a final report to me, you would, you know, make this a little bit prettier, right? You could maybe change the titles that it defaulted to. Maybe the numbers can be with currency format, so you can have dollar signs like this, for example, okay, and so on and so forth, okay? I'm gonna undo that. Oops, yeah. And so that's a pivot table, all right? Now, let's say we want to look at this pivot table and do a chart, right? So I'm just gonna select this pivot table. Oops. Right? I'm gonna select this pivot table just like that, and I'm gonna do a insert chart. But this time I'm gonna do a bar chart, right? A basic bar chart, right? And there you have it. There's the basic bar chart right here. I just selected this pivot table and I created insert basic bar chart. The first, oops, bar chart, okay? And there you have it. And I can put that, I'm gonna put this right over here, right? So you can see entertainment, food, home, and car, shopping, etc. In a visual format, okay? So we've tried scatter plots, we've tried a basic bar chart, and again, when you double click on this, you can change lots of things. You can change the name of the chart, you can change what do you call it, title, and so on, okay? You can do a lot, you can put borders and basically customize the colors and so on, okay? I'm not gonna go into that because you can do that yourselves, okay? That's pretty easy. All right. Okay, now, so that was the second exercise. Now we're gonna do some basic addressing, okay? Relative versus absolute addressing. What I'm gonna do here is I'm going to, I lost these things that were supposed to be here, so I'm gonna copy them. And I'm gonna go right here and paste it, okay? Just the label. So I wanna now see what the average expenses, what my lowest expenses, what my highest expenses, which is the max, and how many expenses do I have in my data set, right? So this is very, very, very basic stats, and I am going to use formulas to do that, right? So, for example, I'm going to go here, and when you do a formula, you type in equal, okay? Now, before we get into formulas, so formulas are fields, cells that have references to other cells that they're using to manipulate or do some calculation before presenting it to the user, okay? So when you think of average, what's the formula for average, right? Formula for average is, well, first of all, you start the formula with equal. When you start the cell with an equal, that means that you are, that's an indication to Excel that you're about to type in not a value, but a formula, right? So it processes the cell differently. So I'm going to do average, it'll say equal, and I'm going to take all of these charges, right? Basically, I'm going to select them all, okay? All right. No, that's not what I want. Let me back up. I want to do a sum of all of these. A sum is a function, okay? And then I want to take a sum of all of these values, okay? Oops. I lost my space, hold on. Sum, actually I can just do sum open and then I can select that entire column. Okay, that adds up all of those amounts. And then I want to divide, right, by the number of those cells, which is basically the same formula, except it's with the count function. And if I do that, you can see that it basically took the sum of everything and divided by the number of items, right? But that was a harder way to do this, right? I didn't need to do it in the 2 steps. I can actually find a function. If I go to the function wizard up here, this is the function wizard right here. It opens up a dialog box. It says, okay, what do you want to do? Well, I'm already in count. I don't want that. So let me delete this and start again, equal, and I'm going to do function. And then I say I want to average. So I'm going to type in and look for an average function. I can search. And sure enough, there's an average function. It tells you what it does. And basically, when you're not sure and you don't remember because you don't use all the functions that often, you just go into this wizard, this function dialog box, and search for what you're looking for. And it will give you suggestions. And then you can hover over these functions. And this is the recommended functions that Excel is offering to you. And you can basically hover over them and see what the differences are and pick which one you need to do the task that you're trying to do. So I'm just going to pick the average function here. It tells me, well, I'm looking for a parameter. And what are the numbers you want to put in? Well, I can type in each number by having each cell here, or I can just type in C to C, basically, and it will hopefully, yeah, and it tests it right here. You can see 49.81, so it's working. So all I have to do is hit OK, and there it is. There's the average. I can do the same thing, but I can do shorthand. I don't have to do the full function drop down or the dialog box because I can actually use the min function directly because I happen to know it. And again, it's the same thing except I use min instead of average. Okay, so if I do this, I get 50 cents is my minimum, right? And then I'm going to do max, which is the max of this data set, this column, and my maximum was 18 65, which you remember from the sort example that we did. And finally, we're going to count how many expenses we have, okay? And we're going to do C to C. Okay. Now, this count is not exactly right? Because if we go and see, it says 177, but if we go to our data set, you can see going down that it ends at 178, right? And that is because the first row of this table is the column headings, right? So since we did not specify start from row 2, which we could have done by just doing C2, no, you have to actually put in C2 to the actual set. We will just leave it like this right now in the interest of time because I think you understand it. And it basically counts the rows instead of the actual data point. So it's really one less, right, than what's being shown here. This number is overstated by 1, okay? So we can actually, to be correct, we can say including header, right? So we're correct, okay? So that's how you do basic formulas, okay? Now, what's this relative and absolute addressing? Well, relative addressing is when we use these cell references without a qualifier that makes them absolute. So for instance, what happens is if we copy this, right? If I just do a copy, okay? And let's say I paste it here, okay? Just these 4 values, okay? It's going to give me erroneous results. It's not going to give me what I want, okay? I actually just wanted to copy this. Why did it do that? Because these cells in these formulas are relative, meaning it is designed to change these cells. If I go in here and you see what it's saying here, it's saying actually average J to J, but this average was average C to C. What's going to happen J to J? Well, in column J, there's nothing, it's blank, so it's not figuring these numbers out correctly because it's using the wrong cells. And the reason it's doing that, because Excel has a habit, and for convenience, when you copy formulas to do large-scale analysis, it automatically assumes that you want the labels, the cells to shift. Because we shifted this 4 or 5 columns over, it's going to shift the addressing 4 or 5 columns, which actually makes it land on J, okay? And it does that because oftentimes you want to do average, min, max, count, and so on and so forth for multiple columns. And you do it once and you just copy paste and it actually works quite nicely. But in this case, I actually didn't want to do that. I just wanted to make sure that I can copy that directly. And so what I have to do is I have to use absolute addressing. And the way you do that is you just click on this formula, right? And click on the cells and hit function F4, and it will put $signs in front of the row and the column. The $sign makes this cell reference absolute. So when I hit enter, it's going to give me the same answer, right? But it's basically telling Excel, hey, Excel, if I ever copy this or if I ever use this reference elsewhere, I don't want you to change it. I want to keep the cells fixed, okay? So let's see what happens. If I copy, Control C, copy, right? This cell back to here and do a paste, you can see now it's working because if I do, if I look at what's in these formulas, it's still, it keeps the cell reference exactly the same no matter where I'm copying it, right? Now, of course, I didn't do that for the rest, but I just wanted to show you the difference between relative and absolute addressing. And by the way, if you want to change this back, you can just highlight it again and just hit F4 again. Now look what happens. If I hit F4, again, it makes the $signs disappear, which means we're back to relative addressing. If I hit it again, we're back to absolute addressing. If I hit it again, it basically toggles, right? Essentially. So that's how relative addressing works. Now I'm just going to delete these so we don't mess up our spreadsheet. Okay. How are we doing? Are we doing good? Please, a few of you put on the chat window if you are following. Okay, perfect. Okay, easy peasy so far, right? All right. Okay. So let's move along. We are going to move to descriptive statistics. Slightly different topic, and we will move along now. What we're going to do in descriptive statistics, we're going to use this analytics pack, right? Or analysis pack, I think it's called. This is the feature in Excel that you turned on at the onset of the training, right? That we did about a half an hour ago. I had you turn that on, and most of you should have, or all of you should have done that. So what we're going to do here is enable the analytics pack to give us some just basic statistics, okay? And if the way we do that is we click on the data tab up here, okay? This data tab is amazing. This is where all of the data science stuff and the data analytics and the what if analysis, everything with data manipulation and analysis is in this menu option, okay? And right over here on the right, there's the analyze group. And if you go to data analysis, you will get the essence of what's included in the analytics pack, okay? And here what we're going to do is we're going to do descriptive statistics, okay? Just click on descriptive statistics, put your cursor right underneath this heading, and you will get a dialog, okay? Now what we want is we want to basically have a range, okay, of items, right? So what we're doing here is we're doing descriptive statistics on just the debit column. So we're going to click on column C, okay? And I'm going to say, yes, there are labels in the first row. Because remember, the first row has no data. It just has the label in the column heading, right? Column heading. Now, the output options, the default is new worksheet. I don't want a new worksheet. I want it right here. So I'm going to do output range, and that's what you need to do as well. And then put the cursor right in the output range field, and then click on the cell right here underneath the heading of descriptive statistics on my spreadsheet. Once you test this out, you see it, you want summary statistics turned on, and just click OK. And what it should do, it should take the debit column and give you all the good descriptive statistics automatically, right? It's giving you the average, and look at that. That average is the same that we calculated, but now the analytics pack is doing that for you. Standard error, the median, the mode, standard deviation, kurtosis, the skewness of the data, the range, the minimum. Look, it's 50 cents. That was the minimum we came up with, right? Or you know, when we did it manually. And the maximum is 1865. The sum is 8,816, and the count is 177. So we came up with all of this ourselves. This is an extra validation. We didn't actually need to do that. We could have just done the analytics pack, and it gives you all of these features. Now, of course, as you saw earlier, there are many features, right? There's different options. When we go into data analysis, you can have a lot of different statistical analysis. The ANOVA, it's got single factor, double factor, correlation, which we're going to use in a little bit. You can do F-tests, you can do histograms, you can do regression. This is very, very cool stuff that you have right out of the box for free. But you have to enable the analytics pack, okay, to be able to do that. So if I gave you an assignment in one of my classes to tell you to draw a regression line for a data point with a bunch of expenses or a bunch of financial data, maybe stock market data, you should be able to do that. And you just use the analytics pack, set it up with the correct options. It'll be a little trial and error for any of these. And then you'll be able to interpret that. Now, some of you don't remember some of these major concepts from your statistics class, or perhaps haven't had statistics. That might be a little challenging. You'll then have to read up on what regression is or sampling is and so on. If that, if you see that in any of your classes. But this is really cool, yet basic, but very powerful and very universally used statistical tools, okay? And it's all bundled for you in the analytics pack in Excel. Okay, so now we have the descriptive statistics all going here. Let's do number 5, which is called correlation, right? So we want to see if we can do, if there's any kind of correlation between the date, all right, of the transaction and the transaction itself, right? So I want to find out, geez, am I spending more or less depending on how far I am into my data or my period? So for example, am I spending, is there any kind of relationship between what I'm spending in January versus February versus March, or as the days go on, right? I tend to, eat less in the winter months in restaurants and maybe eat more when it warms up because I'm out more and so on and so forth. So let's say I want to do that analysis. How do I correlate the date and the charges on my credit card? Well, so one of the ways we can do it, there's many ways to do it. We can use correlation, right? Correlation is a statistical analysis that's done. It's the most basic of the ones I showed you in the list in the tool pack. And what it says is you can compare one variable of data to another variable of data very easily. And if the correlation is closer to 1, the correlation coefficient, that means the data, the two variables are very tightly correlated, right, in the positive direction, meaning if one is high, the second is high. If one is low, the second is low, right? If there's a 0 value for the correlation coefficient, that means the data is completely uncorrelated, right? And if the correlation coefficient approaches -1, -1, that means that there is a strong negative correlation, right? So correlation coefficients go from -1 to +1, right? And depending on where you are, it gives you an indication, a very good indication if the two variables are correlated, and if they are, which way are they correlated, right? And is the correlation strong or weak, right? So if you didn't remember that lesson on correlation, that's a very simple way of explaining it to you, and I hope that made sense. So now let's see how this works. Let's go in and do, I think I have mistyped something here. This should be not solver, it is, it's not using solver, it's correlation, and then it is using analytics pack, right? Or analysis pack. Okay, I'll show you the solver in a bit. But so we're going to go here and we're going to do data analysis. All right. Oops. Now this time, instead of descriptive statistics, I'm going to select correlation, and I'm going to say okay. And now it's saying, what's your range? Well, actually, I forgot to do one thing here. I need to take this date. Now, every date value has actually a number, okay, internal to Excel. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to actually cancel this out. And what you're going to do is you're going to take, let's cancel out of the correlation stuff. We're going to copy column A and paste it right before column, the debit column, right? So basically I'm duplicating the date. But this time I'm going to select the date column. I'm going to title this num date. And you'll see why in a second. And I'm going to title this num date, and I'm going to select this column and do a date, a format. Go into this formatting of numbers on the home menu, and I'm going to select number. Okay, and if I select number, you'll see what it does here. It changes the date to a numerical number. This is because, unbeknownst to us, Excel doesn't really know. Excel is a numbers tool, right? Although it was nice enough to format these dates for us, it doesn't know anything about these dates, really speaking, right? When it does calculations, it converts this date to some sort of number that they're keeping track of. I'm not going to explain the algorithm or where they're getting this number from. There's a really good explanation. That's not the point for this exercise. But you can see that the same date, 1/1/2019, translates into 43,466. And you can see 1/2, January 2nd, translates into one higher, right? 43,467. So these numbers are in increasing in order, basically, of the real date. And we need this because when we do a correlation, the analysis tool pack cannot compare correlate dates to numbers. It has to correlate numbers to numbers, right? So we're going to accomplish that by creating a dummy column, right, for the time being, and converting the date into the number, just like what we did. Okay, and then we're going to go back here, okay, and we're going to go into the data menu, and we're going to go to data analysis, and we're going to do correlation, okay, and we are now going to take both these columns together, C and D, okay, and labels are in the first row, so we want to do that, and select labels in the first row, then click output range. And you will then do the same thing like you did before. You put your cursor on the range box and you click on the actual cell where you want the output to go. And we're going to say, okay. And it's actually going to create a small little table, right? Perfectly, right? And what is this table showing us? Well, what this table is showing us is obviously num date, which is column C, is 100% correlated to num date, right? Obviously, that's those data points, this one and this other one mean nothing, right? Because you naturally expect the same column to be completely correlated to each other. It's not a valuable exercise. But what we want to look for is this correlation coefficient when the num date is correlated to debit, right? So these two columns are being correlated, and what does this show us? Well, it shows us a -0.1 correlation. Now remember what we said earlier, right? If the number is negative, and it can go as high as -1, right? That means there is a correlation on the opposite side. That means when the dates are going higher, the debit actually is not as high, right? But a 0.1 is almost insignificant. It's so close to 0 that the right analysis would be, well, they're nearly not correlated at all. They have no correlation, okay? So that would be the takeaway, that my expenses actually are fairly random. They don't follow any kind of date pattern when you look at the data from January of last year to March of last year. Okay, there's a question about from CB, if I can repeat how I did the num date. Sure I can, CB. Let me try. Okay, the num date is literally a copy. I'm going to do it again here. I'm going to just click on the cell, okay? And I'm going to do a copy. copy shortcut is Control C. You can also go up here and you can say, go to home and you can say, where is it? Right here, you can do a copy. This is the copy menu. But I like to do Control C because it's quicker. I just highlight column A, I do Control C. Then I put my cursor right in column C or right in column D, and I would just do a paste. Okay, when you do a paste, you copy the column right next to the column D, basically, right? But you get the same date, right? And the way we change the number format is you go to the format, the number group format here on the home menu, and you click on, instead of date, you will click on number. So it just converts that date into a number, right? And that's how you create the num date field. So I'm going to rename this now to num date, just so I know that I did it, right? And actually, I'm going to highlight this so that I know that it was me who did this as part of the analysis. Okay? So hopefully that was clear. If not, you need to try it a few times, and I'm sure you'll get there. It's not very difficult, and you should be good to go. Perfect. Okay. All right. So we just tried analysis pack with correlation. Okay, and we determined that my data when I compare date to my expenses is virtually, there's a small negative correlation, but it's very small, 0.1. If this was more than 0.5, I would say, okay, now the data is showing me some sort of pattern, but there's no pattern. A zero correlation, if the number is really close to zero, basically there's virtually no pattern recognition, or no, it's fairly random, right? It's fairly arbitrary. But it was a nice test. We tested the data and it came up fairly arbitrary, okay? Now, while we're on that topic, I'm going to jump to module 2 here, and you'll see that I did a similar analysis while it's fresh in your mind with temperature data. And I actually don't want you to try this. You can try this at home. But basically, I downloaded from the weather station online the temperature data for Stamford, Connecticut from June, roughly the beginning of summer, right, June 21st or so, to December 23rd or so, which is the beginning of winter, right, according to the calendar for 2019. And I got all of this data, right? I've got the date, and again, here again, I converted the date to the number, right? This was actually a different date. It was something, you know, it was in date format, but I converted it much like I did in my expense example. And then this temperature was received, I got the date and the temperature from the Weather Service, and I downloaded this data. This is 6 months worth of temperature data. And what I did first is I scatter plotted just the date and the temperature, and you can see that there's a downward spiral, right? You can see that there's a downward trend. If I were to put a trend line through this, you can see going down. Now that makes sense, right? Does this look correct? Yes, because you expect the temperature to slowly, first it'll peak a little bit in the summer and then it'll slowly go down. Now with global warming and so many other factors, I wasn't sure what I was going to end up with, right? This could have been completely random, right? Frankly, but it was nice. It was reassuring to see that actually, you know, the data is close to what we would expect. As the summer wears off and we go into winter, the temperature starts falling, right? The average temperature. By the way, these are max temperatures, but I could have used average, or I could use the minimum for the day. It doesn't matter as long as the units are the same. So I just downloaded the max temperature for each day from June to December to do this analysis. And then I ran the same correlation that I showed you with my expenses. And here, check it out. I get a -8.8. That's a strong negative correlation. What that means is, as the dates are increasing, which means when we're going from June to July to August to September, so on and so forth, we are seeing the temperature go the other way, right? So the date value increases, but the temperature goes down, right? Again, we're comparing numbers to numbers, right? So there's always an ordinality of numbers, that means that the greater numbers are just looked upon as the real value of the number. So when the date goes up, the date number actually increases, right? Like you can see 638, 639, 640, 641. And then the temperature is just the temperature. So, but you can see the temperature is random, right? You can see that it's not necessarily, it's every day the temperature is different. But overall, over a 6-month period, the temperature is negatively correlated to the date. As the date increases, the temperature goes down as we go into the summer months. Had I done this for a whole year, maybe I challenge you, or I ask you to try this on your own time for a whole year. Maybe you could do it for your city in Bridgeport, or maybe you can do it, in a city in India if you're from India, and just see what the temperature was like and use the correlation coefficient to see if there's a correlation in the seasons that you would expect the temperatures to go down or up. Okay, but this is a more interesting application of the correlation coefficient. But I also did it in the expense module because I wanted you to see how it would work in this test case that we're doing, okay? I hope that made sense and you learned a little bit about how to use Analysis Pack. Again, there's so much there. And by the way, any one of these you can plug into YouTube and you'll have a wonderful person like me, maybe not as good as me, just kidding. But another great video that you can, grab off of the internet, and they'll cover every single function and every single thing that you might be stuck in. So there's so much wealth of information. There's really no need to worry about learning any nook and cranny of Excel. I mean, if you're stuck, somebody else was stuck and somebody created a video for you, I can almost guarantee it. Plus, there's tons of documentation. All right, let's move to conditional formatting. What is conditional formatting? Well, conditional formatting says, it's like the word, it's very intuitive. I want to format something on my data set or my spreadsheet, but with a certain condition. So for example, I had started this analysis letting you know that I picked this data set because I wanted to find out how much money I'm spending on food. So if food was my focus, perhaps one of the things I want to do is highlight the category food when it appears as food in a different color. So if I just click on this column and I go to this styles menu here, a styles ribbon, and I click on conditional formatting, I want to create a color scale, right? Or highlight cell rules, right? And I want to create a rule to highlight a cell when it's equal to, right? You can see different parameters here. And then it'll say, well, format the cells that are equal to food, right? And when I type in food, that means that because I had this selected, it knew that I'm looking for category of food. And then it says, fill with light red fill or dark red text. I'm gonna leave the default, but obviously you can change that if you want. And I click OK. What this means is it's doing a conditional formatting. It automatically formatted my data set in that column for when it said food. So as you can see, for visual analysis or accountants use this features a lot. When you have complex balance sheets, you want to see equipment versus labor versus materials highlighted in different colors for visual appeasement, and great looking professional reports. This is a wonderful way to automatically do formatting. Basically, conditional formatting in brief means that you can put conditions, maybe even some complex conditions, maybe even some equations or some calculations that drive how formatting is going to look. Okay, I just did a basic one for you just to give you a little bit of taste for what we're talking about. All right, are you guys with me? I hope. Oops. Very nice. Okay, I'm so happy that you're able to follow along. We are doing great overall. Okay, superb. So that was conditional formatting, as I said. Let us go to doing now a lookup. Well, what is a lookup? Okay. A VLOOKUP is called a vertical lookup. It's short for vertical lookup. There are many other lookup type fields. There's a horizontal lookup. There's an X lookup. There is, they all do slightly different things. And again, it is a function, just like averaging, minimizing, maximizing function, count, all of those things that we did. VLOOKUP is literally a function, so you can actually enable the function by the function wizard here, or the function drop down, or the function dialog box, as we called it. And what this does is, let's just say I want to create another column here, right? I want to create another column, and I want to call this column tax status, okay? Why do I want to create tax status? Well, let's say that I can, because I run a business, and I don't run a business, by the way, but let's just say I was running a business and these were my business expenses. I might be able to claim certain tax write-offs, or create some other clever accounting so I can get some money back from the government, right? At the end of a period or end of the quarter or so on. You can almost imagine that scenario being the case. So I have my tax rules basically say is, well, entertainment expenses are normally taxable. Food is normally non-taxable. Home and car, sometimes it's taxable, sometimes it's not, it's mixed. And shopping is taxable, okay? Let's say those are my rules, right? And so I create this small table. It's just typed in here, right? Entertainment, food, home and car, taxable, non-taxable, mixed, taxable, right? And I'm going to create a VLOOKUP function here, right? I'm going to say =VLOOKUP, okay? And when I hit enter, oops, I'm going to actually go into the function wizard by clicking that button I showed you earlier. And I'm going to look up a value. So I'm going to look up this category, right? Okay. In my table array is the second parameter, and that is basically this table, right? This is my table array. And you can see that it's actually building the function for me. So what I'm trying to do is, I'm trying to look up column E, okay? And I'm looking it up in this table. The default is it's always going to look it up on the leftmost column, right? That is how the VLOOKUP works by default. So when I say E2 and I put the table array of M24 to N27, M24 to N7 is this little table, it's going to look up E2 in this first column, okay? When it sees entertainment, it's going to return the second column, right? So the second column is what it would return, right? That means that this is column 1 in this table, this is column 2, right? This is column 2, right? Oops, okay, 2, right? So what this is going to do is, if I hit enter, you can see in the wizard what it's doing is it recognized that I'm looking for food, right? That's what's in E2. And I'm looking at it in this table, and it found food, and food basically is non-taxable, so it's returning non-taxable, okay? We're not going to worry about the range lookup, the last parameter, it's optional. What the range lookup does is it tells it to, it gives it, okay, what do I do if I don't find the value? But in this case, my data is clean. I'm going to find all of these values. It's either entertainment, food, home, car, and shopping, right? So there's no question that I'm not going to find it. So I'm going to leave that blank because it's optional. See, if it's grayed out, that means it's optional. The bold-faced parameters like lookup value, table array, column index number is required, right? So if I click OK, you will see that it added non-taxable. So what a VLOOKUP does is it basically just looks up a value in one column, right, in a row, and goes and grabs related data. So in this case, I wanted to look up tax data, tax status, right, specifically. And I did that for one row. Now, we remember the conversation we just had about 15, 20 minutes ago about relative and absolute addressing, right? What addressing was here? You can see that this is relative addressing. There are no funky little dollar signs, all right? So that means if I copy this and I can drag, this is a shortcut, I just left mouse click all the way down just like this, all the way to the end of the data set. You can also do by copy paste. If I did this, oops, what did we do here? Let's see. I must have made a mistake. Let me see what I did. So this one worked. This one also worked. You can see the thing changing. Oh, yes. So what's wrong with this, right? Okay, well, let me undo this. All right, there you go. Now, we want, as we copy this, we want the E, the first lookup column, to change, right? If I go here, I want it to be E3, and then E4, and then E5, and so on, right? But I don't want the table to change, right? The table was fixed. It was down here. This is my table, right? It's my table. I don't want this thing to change. I'm going to shade it so I remember, right? I don't want this to change at all, excuse me. So what I need to do is I need to click on this and then do the function F4, right? And I need the dollar signs because that freezes that table array. So when I copy this over to the next row, it's not going to move those cells. Now let's see what happened. We can just copy and paste it on these cells, or we can just use the left mouse click and drag it all the way till the end, and it does the same thing. It's a shortcut for copy paste. And now you can see it works, right? It works because we used the relative addressing where we want it, which is the lookup area. We want the E to change, right? But we don't want the M24 to N27 to change because that table, that lookup table we don't need to shift that every time we move a different row. But by default, it will shift because it was using relative addressing, which means it didn't have those funky dollar signs, right? So that's the difference between and the power of relative versus absolute addressing, okay? Are you guys with me? That is your VLOOKUP example for the afternoon. All right, couple of chats, please, to make sure you're with me. All right, good. Thank you, Sakif. Thank you. Perfect. Okay, so we have just done VLOOKUP. We did the analytics pack. Now we're moving to slightly different and more exciting functions or capabilities, I should say. Give me a second here. Okay, so there's a question whether this works for only 2 columns. So Bhushan, if you're talking about the lookup, VLOOKUP, you can do vertical lookup or horizontal lookup. And yes, it is column based. So it basically looks for a certain column and looks it up in that table. Now you can be very creative. You can look up calculated columns, right? It doesn't have to be a direct column. You can actually have a derived column, an abstraction. Remember we talked about the abstraction? That means that if a column depends on another column and another column depends on the other column, you can actually take the value of a calculated field and then look it up in a table. But generally the table array is fixed. It's usually for small lookups like a reference table. Think about it as a reference table, right? If you had a list of products, right, and the products were one of four prices, there was either $1, $5, $10, or $20, but you had tons of different products, but you only had four prices, for example, or maybe even sizes for a dress, right? And you're trying to keep track of inventory. You can look up small, medium, large, extra large, and you can do a lookup based on certain parameters in that data file to go and get the price or the size or something like that. But that's really what VLOOKUPs are used for. They can get a little bit more complicated, but not much more complicated than what I showed you. And again, all of these are depending on your creativity and upon your use. I'm showing you the very basic use case. Certainly, if you know how it works, you can make it work for other slightly more complicated scenarios, right? Okay. So let's move to 8, problem set 8, and this is using Solver. Now Solver is really cool, all right? Solver this is where it starts to get, you know, really cute, okay? Solver basically says is, let's just say in this example, by the way, in this example, it was too confusing to use my own financial data. So I just created another simple example, right, and stuck it here. Let's say I'm about to buy some equipment, okay? And the equipment costs $40,000, right? And I have a business with a ton of clients, and I can use that equipment for servicing the clients. Let's say it's a printing machine or something like that, all right? And my estimate is I have approximately 50 clients a month, right? And I could charge about $12 or something, right? But what this does is I'm trying to figure out a number of months I need to pay off this machine, right? If I have $12 per client and about 50 clients a month, right? So this formula is N30, you can see it, N30 divided by N31 times N32. This is N, so N30 is my equipment cost. So 40,000 divided by 50 times 12, essentially. And I get 66 months, okay, to 66.6 months to pay off this equipment. Well, that's a very long time, okay? And the bank won't give me a loan for that long. The bank wants me to return this money in 12 months. So my objective is 12 months. And of course, what I can do is just play around with these numbers to see how many clients I need and how much I need to charge to get this down to 12 months. Or I can use Solver and have the system do it for me, have Excel do it for me, okay? So I'll show you how to do that in a second. All right, we have a question from Sammy. Sammy, what is BEP? What are you talking about? I don't understand. Can you clarify your chat question, Sammy? Break-even point. Good point. No, it's not break-even. Well, you could use the analysis for break-even, but it's really, in this example, I just want to, basically I'm taking a loan for this equipment and the bank needs the money back in 12 months, but I don't know how much I have to serve, whether that's possible or not, right? I need to know how many clients do I need to do a month and how much do I need to charge, right? To do it, all right? So it's basically a calculation, but it's iterative, right? I would have to keep changing these numbers and trying different things to get it down to 12. If we use Solver, we can specify the objective and it can figure it out for us. It's very, very cool, right? So for example, I'm going to specify the objective of 12 months to pay it back, right? Then I'm going to say, I have two constraints. The constraint is that my loan is exactly $40,000, right? I don't want to change that. And that I can't possibly get more than 50 clients, right? I have to get 50 or less. It's impossible. It's not feasible to get more than 50 clients, right? So it's going to be 50 clients or less per month. I'm putting some artificial constraints, and then I want to see what it takes. What kind of, how much am I supposed to charge these clients, right? So let's see how that works. Okay, so we're going to go to data, and we're going to go to solver this time, not data analysis, but solver. The solver is another tool, okay, and you should try this, okay. I'm going to set the objective of, I'm going to delete this, pretend I didn't have it, like you would probably, and I'm going to select this cell, which is my months to payback, right? Which happens to be N34. It automatically, look at that, it's smart enough to automatically put the dollar signs because it wants this to be absolute, right? The tool is doing that, we're not doing it, okay? And I'm going to say, I want it exactly 12 months. I don't want it lower, I don't want it higher, I want to pay it off in 12 months. So I hit the value of button and I put 12. So that is my objective. You can see it sets the objective, okay? Then it's saying, well, what do you want to change? Which parameters am I allowed to change? And well, we want to change 31 and 32, right? Row 31 and 32, which is essentially the clients and cost of service, right? So you can see N31 and N32 again with absolute. And then I can add constraints, and I would add constraints that says N30, right, is exactly equal to 40,000. Add another constraint that says N31 is less than or equal to 50, right? And so that would add exactly what I want, okay, to set up this problem. Then make sure this is clicked, make unconstrained variables non-negative, and then select the solving method, which you want to select the default, which is GRG nonlinear, okay? And click solve. Okay, if we do this, it's saying solver found a solution. If you're successful in doing this, it'll give you this message. It'll say solver found a solution. All constraints and optimality conditions are satisfied. Keep solver solution, right? Say okay. And here it is, right? It did it for me. It set this to as close to 12 as it could, which is close enough. It's a rounding error. It set the number of clients to 50. It wants me to do 50 because it knows that if I do less than 50, the cost is going to be too high. And then the cost per service is approximately $66 instead of the $12 I was trying to get by on. So what this tells me is for this business to work and for this equipment to make sense in this small example, and for me to pay this off, I have to have at least 50 clients and charge them at least $66.66 per service in order to recoup my $40,000 back so I can pay it. And remember, I haven't even calculated profit, right? But this is just a simple example to show you. So what you could do with Solver is have very complicated analysis and set it up with constraints and maximize and the objective function, and then minimize, maximize, or come as close to the value that you're looking for under certain calculations. And basically, it's an automated way for solving numerical problems and analysis, right? And doing sort of what ifs, right? There's like kind of a what if analysis. This can be pretty complicated. I just wanted to show you. Certainly in my classes this semester, we're not going to be using this, but I wanted you to just see what's out there, because this is very, very powerful. People use this all the time in industry. And at least you know it's out there, and I'm going to encourage you to, when you have time, to play with this some more, with some more complex examples. You can download some complex examples from the internet. I can give you some more examples, whatever. And you can get some more experience. All right, let's move to number 9. And this is goal seek. Okay, goal seek is one more analysis that I wanted to show you under the data menu, okay? And what this does is it answers questions like this, okay? It's saying, well, let's say I want to buy a house, okay? I want to buy a house and I've selected a house, $250,000, okay? That's the price of the house. I want to take a 30-year loan. So the number of months is 360. So for those of you who are in my 6617 class in New Haven, you will appreciate this example because this is right out of the cost analysis and estimation examples for about 3 weeks ago, right? Using the payment function in Excel, figuring out the monthly payment given the interest rate and the period and the present value. So the present value is $250,000. The number of months is 360. Okay, that is 30 years, right? 12 months a year. The interest rate assumption is 4%. If I took a loan for $250,000, assuming no down payment, right? 100% loan, my monthly payment would be $1,193.54, okay? That's what my monthly payment, that's what I would have to pay the bank. If I don't pay that bank that much, I will default my loan, which obviously we don't want to do. Now let's say that is no good. I actually don't make that much money. I need to spend a little bit less every month, and I can't make $1,193, even though the bank is saying, sure you can. They'll obviously encourage you to spend more, but you may not be able to, right? And let's say in my example, I only have $1,000 monthly budget, okay? And I want to find out with the $1,000, how much house can I buy, right? How much can I actually buy? So I go to data and I go to this nice little tab here that's called what if analysis, right? So the what if here is, what if I only had $1,000, even though my calculation and the house, my dream house is costing you $250,000, interest rates are pretty low. And by the way, they're getting lower again, right? Given the environment right now. I still only can make $1,000 given these parameters, right? So what if I can only have $1,000 to spend? What would that do to my house price? How much of a house can I afford for just $1,000, right? So I go into what if, and there's this really neat little tool called Goal Seek. And Goal Seek is basically, as it says, it's seeking the optimal solution based on the goal. And the goal is now that I have $1,000, right? I have $1,000. I don't have any more, right? So I'm going to do, let's see. I want to set the cell, this cell, right, to $1,000 by changing this cell, okay? I think that's going to work. Let me see if it does. There you go. So what did I do here? Let's cancel and do it again. So I'm going to click on Goal Seek, and I'm going to say, I want this monthly payment. Even though now it says $1,193, I want this thing to say $1,000, right? I want it to calculate to $1,000, but it has a formula in there, right? So I don't want to mess with the formula. The formula is correct. Actually, let's go look at the formula. The formula is the payment function, right? And the payment function is what? It's telling me that I want to use M39 by 12, which is the number of, the interest rate. The first parameter for payment function is the interest rate. The interest rate is annual 4%, so monthly interest rate would be annual divided by 12. Then the second parameter is the number of periods, which is really 360, right? So it is M38. And then M37 is the $250,000, and my outlay is minus, right? So I put a minus sign in there. So I'm giving $250,000. I'm spending $250,000, right? So that's how it figured out the 1193, and now I'm trying to goal seek, right? I'm trying to goal seek to make this $1,000. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to type in the cell that I want it to calculate $1,000. So that is right here is the M40. And then the value is going to be 1,000. And I say, well, keep everything constant, but change the house value, because I don't have control of the number of periods and I don't have control over the interest rate, right? So I'm going to keep that constant, and I'm going to say, well, for $1,000, work backwards with these formulas, however complicated my formula set is and my analysis is, I want you to work backwards and try to tell me how much of a home price can I afford, right? And when I do that, it actually does that right away. It says, okay, you can have your $1,000 monthly payment, but at 4% interest and 360 periods, which is a 30-year loan, you can only afford a home of $209,461.24. So this is super powerful. You can see that it would take me forever manually to figure out this information. I had a starting point. I know what my goal was, and it basically does a goal seek, which means it seeks out your goal automatically for you and tells you the answer that you're looking for. Okay, you may not like it. You know, when we bought our first house, we did something like this, and we realized, shoot, we can't afford the house in the area that we really wanted, so we had to look in a different area, right? Back then. So they're very valuable. Again, you can hopefully, if you've done this and you've seen it and you're following along, you can actually see so many different applications for this in your own analyses, personal, or even in some of your assignments and so on, okay? So there you go. That was the goal seek, okay? Now, we have a few more minutes left, and I want to show you some VBA, okay? VBA is Visual Basic Macros. Visual Basic is a scripting language, and it comes in the developer pack, and you can basically write code, very complicated code, to make Excel do so many different things that you can't accomplish through functions, and you really need a whole programming language for, right? So if we go to developer, we see a lot of different ribbon, obviously. We see XMLs, we see controls, we see add-ins, and we see coding, right? The easiest VBA, Visual Basic implementation, is using a macro. A macro is simply, if you do a set of instructions repeatedly, you might want to create a macro so that you can do repeated functions by just hitting a key, right? It actually is VBA code that you need to do that, but a macro does it for you, and you don't actually have to code. You can just look at the code. For example, let's say in my world, I really like to change fonts, and I like this one font that I change all the time, right? So I can do a record macro, and by the way, just follow along. Don't do this right now. You can do this on your own time, because if you don't follow, you might skip it. And then it gets really confusing. So if you do, I'm going to do a record macro, and it tells you what macro, just names it a macro, and say a shortcut key is Control, let's say W, right? Or no, Control F. Store macro in workbook, cool. So we just hit, oops, the macro is already assigned, so I'm going to do Control Q. Okay. All right, and then I'm going to basically, you can see that it's recording, right? I want to be very careful what I select. So I'm going to select let's see, a particular font. Okay, I'm going to go here. I'm going to select bold, right? I want bold, and I want font of 14. I want the color or color to be red, okay? And I want Calibri, instead of Calibri, I want some sort of script. Let's see, okay? I want like, I'll just do this one, okay? And there you go, right? And I'm gonna stop my macro now. I'm gonna go developer and stop recording, okay? If I go into my macros, and I look at macro 2 that I just created and edit it, you'll see the code that it actually created. It actually created all of the Visual Basic code to actually do what I did, which is basically select a cell, change the a boldface, change the font size, the point size, and change the color and change the font all in one, right? And this is the Visual Basic window. Now, if I go, and what did I do? I think I did Control W. If I go and click on Home Price and I hit a Control W, you can see, oops, let's just do a save. I don't know what I did. I think it was Control Q, thanks. I messed myself up. Thank you. Let me open my workbook again. Sample workbook. There you go. All right. So it was Control Q. So if I go here and I do Control Q, and I go to the next cell and I do Control Q, and I go to the next cell, I do Control Q, I go to the following. So you can see that I can automate my favorite things, my favorite actions by just recording a macro, and that creates the VBA, the Visual Basic, behind the scenes. Now, once it does that, you can edit it too. You can actually edit. So a lot of times what programmers do is they create a standard macro, and then they go and edit it the way they like, right? To make it easier so you don't have to write the code from scratch. The other thing you can do with VBA is you can use active X controls, right? You can create a button. Let's say I want to create a button here. Oops, you saw what happened here. I'm going to just take this out. I shouldn't have deleted it. But I want to create a button to calculate these tax statuses. Remember these tax statuses? I want to now figure out for non-taxable, how much do I have in total? Boy, that would be very hard for me to do manually, right? How would I do that? I would have to use a bunch of if statements, and how would I count up everywhere it says non-taxable to count up the dollars, and everywhere it says mixed to count up the dollars, right? It would be quite difficult to do manually. So I'm going to create a VBA script. What I did is I created an ActiveX control, right? And when I click the button, you can see it put the total for taxable, non-taxable, mixed right here. Again, don't do this right now in the interest of time. We are running out of time a bit, but you could easily, I'll show you how to do this right now, okay? So if we do developer, there's this design mode, right? You basically, first you would have done an insert, and you would do an insert command button, ActiveX control. If you click that, you can put a button anywhere, and you can then change the label and so on. And when you go into design mode, you just double click, and it shows you the code that I actually added. I added a loop, okay? This is, again, if you're not familiar with programming, it might be a little challenging to follow, but this is very quick, basic code. I created a row qualifier to say that I want to start from row 2, because remember, row 1 doesn't have anything, it's just the labels. The tax status, basically in VBA, you use object.function.property, or you reference cells as cells for row, comma, column. And then I'm going through a loop where I'm saying where my tax status is not blank, which means when I'm at the end of the list, my tax status becomes blank, right? But the rest of the data is either taxable, non-taxable, or mixed. And what I'm doing is I'm creating these if statements that says taxable, non-taxable, and mixed. And I'm actually just summing up these totals. And then I'm just advancing the row one by one. So I go to the next row and the row and the next row and the no, and and so on and so forth, right? Advancing the rows. And the 6 here is showing you that I want every row 6th column added, which is actually the dollar amount, right? The debit amount actually is in column 6, right? And the columns are counted from 0 onward. So it's 0, 1, 2, 3, instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, right? It starts from 0. And then finally, I just put the totals in column 43, row 43, column 16, and then I end my function, okay? And that's what this is doing here. So I'm going to take this button away. Basically, that's the code that's behind this button that I added. And it literally, if I delete this, I can just click on this, and it should not be in design mode though. I take it out of my design mode and just click on it, and you'll see the numbers show up, right? And it's a super duper way of instantly creating lots of results, but you have to write code. VBA is all about writing code. Again, you will not need to do any VBA in my classes, at least at University of New Haven. When I teach data science courses, I obviously use VBA, R, and other tools, right? But I just wanted to give you a little taste of what VBA is and why you would use it. And of course, you know, I encourage you all to actually take some time and play with this. Anyway, the results table here shows you everything that we've done and all the code and everything. So there's a clean version of this in your Module 2 results section. So please feel free to start this whole exercise over, copy it, and try the whole thing over so you can practice, okay? It's practice, practice, practice makes it perfect, okay? And then of course I have the temperature data file here as well. So that kind of concludes the hands-on portion. I just want to wrap up I know we're just about done with time. Give me about 4 more minutes and I'll complete this. I do need something important from you, so just stay on for a second. When you want to make professional, let me share the right spreadsheet here. Okay, here we go. Perfect. You should be able to see my PowerPoint. Please tell me that you're able to see PowerPoint. Excellent, thank you. So the last topic here, as I mentioned, is creating professional reports. Well, I showed you everything that we did in one gigantic spreadsheet. That spreadsheet would be completely useless to anyone who's trying to make sense of data and trying to actually derive information and knowledge, right? Remember, data is not about data. Data is about converting data to valuable information, which means it has to be easy to read and it has to be presented properly. So thank God they invented cut and paste, because that's really how I use and how I create polished professional presentations, documents, and so on. You can cut and paste any part of Excel as an Excel object. So you can create a spreadsheet within Word. You can create a spreadsheet within PowerPoint, okay? I would not advise that because it makes it more complicated, and there's no real reason to, because no one's gonna update your spreadsheet once it's in the PowerPoint. Unless you think there's a reason for it, then you would do it that way. You can also cut and paste the data and put it in a table in PowerPoint or Word or whatever. You can also put it in a spreadsheet, and use HTML, and it'll save the data as HTML, and you can pop it into a website and so on for our website designers and developers. That's quite useful. But for most of us, what I like to do is I just like to take what I want, make it a perfect Excel object, like a chart or a table, whether it's those descriptive statistics tables, whether it's the goal seek output, whatever it is, conditional formatting. I make the data look the way I want it, and then I copy and I paste it as a picture. You can do a paste as a picture, right? And then you can do so many different things, and it looks nice and it's readable, and there's no conflicts, right? So that's what I want you to do on my assignments. And I also encourage you to do that elsewhere, because that's how the real world works. And then finally, when you're done, you create a PDF. So check out the example I have here, right? From all of the analysis that we did, this is something that we could have, if I told you, and I was your boss in the workplace, and I said, those are my business expenses, please analyze them and come back to me and show me where I stand. This could be a one-slide presentation that you show me everything. You take the graph that you created, the bar chart, bar graph that you created, the descriptive statistics that you created, the pivot table that you created that showed me expenses by categories, and then finally my top expenses. You might want to show me my top expenses, and these are my top 4 expenses for the period, and you can see that they account for 38%, 36%, 35%, and 21% of my entire spend for the 2.5 months, right? This is powerful. This is worth a lot of money. If you did this analysis for me in the professional world, I would say this is worth a lot of money to me. You're a great employee and you have good analytical skills. However, if you deliver something like that spreadsheet to me in raw form, I might not know what that means or what it does. And of course, this is just illustrative. From here, you would have obviously put in some bullet points, maybe another slide or two to highlight the summary of my of this analysis, and so on, right? So this just gives you show you a power of professional looking slide decks, professional looking documents, and so on, right? And of course, for my assignments this semester, you're going to do this in Word largely, but of course for presentations for case study 5 and so on, you might do a presentation in front of the class, and I'm expecting any Excel analysis to look something like this, right? Professional. Yes, people have asked about snipping tool. Right now I see Ashley is asking me. Snipping tool you can use, but it degrades the quality of the picture. So when you have bigger pictures, it doesn't work quite as well. What I just typically do is copy the section of my spreadsheet and do a paste as a JPEG file or a PNG file or a BMP file, and that seems to work better. And then I can you can see some of my tables here in this example have shading. You can see I'm using some shading techniques and shadows and shading. You can see, so it makes it look like three-dimensional. If you take a quick look on the PowerPoint slide that's in front of you, you'll see that there's some shading and some other formatting that I've done when I do the picture paste, right? But there's a variety of ways to doing it. It's what works best. I found that the paste as works better than taking it from a snipping tool. But sometimes I have to take things from a snipping tool, especially if I'm taking it from a website or so on. But if it's my own analysis, I do picture paste, basically the paste as functionality in any of the Microsoft Office products. Also in Google products, it works. Google Sheets, Google Docs, and so on. All right, in the interest of time, I'm gonna move on. I thank you for your time. I need you to do one more favor for me. This is really important. We've all spent a lot of time here together. I want to make sure that the session was useful. And if not, what's not useful about it? So please type in